A very good morning to all of you. We have been trying to understand the literary terms which are relevant in understanding literature, in studying literature effectively. Today, we will talk about the next important term. It is dialogics. Now, you can see that when we add yes to this dialogic, it becomes a noun and it becomes a kind of science, which studies something. You might be knowing linguistic and linguistics are two different terms, miss, by class. We talk about linguistic element, and linguistics is the study of language, and linguistic is related to language. Now let's go ahead with dialogics. When we talk about the term dialogic, it is associated primarily with the Russian formalist, with the works of Russian formalist Mikhail Bakhtin. Okay, Bakhtin was a literary and linguistic theorist who worked in the Soviet Union during the 1920s, and he is very famous for his theory. And when we talk about Bakhtin and his concept, dialogic, he contrasts the unitary single voice speech of the monologue. Now you might be knowing the term, of course you are very well familiar with it, dialogue. So he contrasts the unitary single voice speech of the monologue, as you are familiar with dramatic monologues by Robert Browning, Lord Tennyson, etc. My Last Duchess, you must have studied in your poetry. So the unitary single voice speech of the monologue. Monologue is a speech by a single person. Unitary means single. Okay, where only one person is speaking. He contrasts monologue with the idea of dialogue. Now, what is dialogue? In dialogue, two or more voices engage with each other from different points of view. Whereas in monologue, a single person talks. There's a single voice. Okay. So monologue, which is also called monologia, okay, uh, is associated with the idea of a centralized power system. You might be knowing in My Last Duchess, the Duke, he talks. He is an elderly person and he alone talks. So it is associated with the idea of a centralized power system, a central character, a single voice speaking the only truth that can exist. His whatever he speaks is the only truth. The person, for example, I gave you the example of My Last Duchess, and or even you can go for the example of another dramatic monologue by Robert Browning. The bishop builds his tomb. In that as well, you come across the character of a bishop, okay, who is on the deathbed. And in My Lord Duchess, you come across an aged duke who is ready to remarry again. So whatever they speak, a single character speaks is the only truth that exists, and it goes without challenge. There is no interplay. There is no interruption. The single person talks, and the other person who is supposed to be present has to listen. Now, when we talk about dialogic speech, it always involves a multiplicity of speakers, means number of speakers. Yes, and as in monologue, there is one perspective There is a one person's perspective. In dialogic speech, you have a variety of perspectives, varieties of ways of looking, you can say. So that is the basic difference. And in monologue, truth goes unchallenged. There is no interplay as such. Whereas in dialogue, truth becomes something negotiated, something debated. As people express their opinions, their views, their perspectives. So there is no only one truth we can say. It goes through the process of negotiation and debate. People oppose that particular idea, and it is not something coming from the horse's mouth. It is not something pronounced from on high, as it happens in the case of monologues. So monologic speech seems to come from God or nowhere. When we talk about monologic speech, it seems to come from God or nowhere. Means it is disassociated from the speaker who originates it, and it is also disassociated from the social relations in which the speaker is embedded. Means the social context is disassociated in the case of monologic speech, whereas dialogic speech acknowledges social relations, sets of social relations between and among speakers. So dialogic speech is more descriptive of historical and cultural realities because people come up with their own views, their perspectives. So dialogic is communication presented in the form of dialogue, and it process dialogic processes refer to implied meaning. Implied means a meaning which is understood, which is not clear, but which can be understood by the people present over there. Okay, it is not explicit, it's implicit. Implied means something which has to be understood in the context. Okay, so it refers to implied meaning in words uttered by a speaker, and it is interpreted by a listener. Look, whatever I'm talking now is interpreted by you people. So this is what implied meaning is. Okay, of course, I'm giving explanation. I'm trying to make it more explicit. But in case of implied speech, as in metaphor, for example, metaphor is an implied comparison between two dissimilar objects. It is implicit. The meaning has to be understood in the context. So when we talk about dialogic process for developing a rich sense of meaning in a text. Now the text requires understanding several different characters' views. To understand the text, you need to understand different characters and their views. So dialogics is a theory which states that fiction is a dialogic genre. Fiction means novel. I once again you need to understand fiction is an imaginative writing. Okay, so fiction is a dialogic genre, and in this dialogic genre, there are many different voices. Okay, and these voices are held in suspension. As in case of monologue, dramatic monologue, etc. Now what happens? Everyone gets merged into a single authoritative voice. Here is not the case. Here everyone has a perspective, everyone comes up with a different perspective, different view. So Bakhtin uses the concept of dialogism in discussing the distinction between novels and poetry as literary forms. And he compares poetry and novels. In poetry, as per Bakhtin, words are used monologically. Means they are used as if they have no connection to social or historical relations. In poetry, a word has meaning only in reference to language itself. Means you need to be familiar with the term pragmatics to understand it. Means meaning within language is a part of semantics, and meaning in the context is called pragmatics, contextual meaning. Okay, pragmatic studies the meaning of words, meanings of sentences, etc. in the context they are used. So a word has meaning only in poetry, we are talking about in reference to language itself, within language. Whereas in prose fiction, means in novel, in short story, in contrast to poetry, words are used dialogically. Means they have both etymological meaning and social meaning. Now, etymological means you must be familiar with the word etymology. Etymology means the study of the origin of words. Etymology means here the original meaning of the word is there, and at the same time it has got a social meaning as well. And when we talk about this kind of novel form, we can understand it with reference to Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist. And Dostoevsky encourages, in the context of novel, dialogic speech. Dialogic speech means in it, different characters speak in recognizably different voices. And all these characters engage with each other in debating worldviews. Means they don't affirm a single worldview. They come up with different worldviews. So you can take the example of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, in which the main character, Raskolnikov, and his sister have different perspectives on the same events. So this is what dialogics is. And in dialogue, when we analyze the text from this particular point of view, in the dialogic analysis, none is correct, neither is correct nor incorrect. No one is correct or incorrect. Because you have got different perspectives of looking at the world. And different characters come up with their different perspectives on different events or on the same events. Okay, this is how we can understand the concept of dialogics.